Welcome everyone. This is Haripriya Challa. Today's session is about embedding coaching culture in great organizations. Would request you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the session. And let me introduce my speakers, BP Bidappa and Anand Shankar. Hi, BP Bidappa comes with 30 years of industry experience. He's from Hindustan Unilever Limited after working in consulting for a little over 2 years in the career spanning over 30 years in Unilever and human resources. He's also studied in economics and management from XLRI Jamshedpur, and Bidappa loves playing squash and is an avid reader, especially in coffee shops. And his purpose is to shape a better business that makes a better world. Bidappa, anything from you? Any opening line?
Thank you so much for having me, Haripriya. You just made me sound a little older than I am, but it's okay.
Thank you. Anand Shankar brings in 30 years of experience, and he's heading the leadership development and talent management at Tata Group. Well, a senior partner with Deloitte and a leader of the firm's HR transformation practice and an alumnus of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Well, Anand's fun fact is he started off as a chef. Maybe we will get to hear from him that as well. And he has watched 30 times as Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan fan. Is a great fan, and he's watched many of their movies at least 30 times. Yes, Anand? Welcome to the session.
All their, only correction is all their movies.
All their movies, right. Right. Thank you. What is a coaching culture? A couple of definitions from Paslow and Hawkins. Coaching culture, and most staff use a coaching approach in their daily life, and we have seen a lot of times that every organization needs coaching thanks to pandemic. We are moving away from training and mentoring, although it's imperative, but then we are moving towards coaching because nobody likes to be told, and everybody likes to be exploring. Everybody wants to explore. Everybody wants to learn from their own blind spots and identifying their blind spots and learn from their mistakes. But then somebody needs to be coached, ask those powerful questions, be it performance appraisal, be it goal setting, or be it a very simple one-on-one conversations with the managers, right? So in the organization, it's not just for the leadership, but yes, we are moving away from the leadership across the levels in the organization and building a great coaching culture. Yes, and I will leave the floor to both the gentlemen here before. Yes, Anand, great works, coach works.
Great. Thank you, Haripriya. Good evening, everybody. And if you're joining from some other part of the world, good day to you. Hi, Dinesh. It's always a pleasure to share a discussion with you. As many of you probably know, the Tata Group is a federation of organizations. It is not a monolithic organization. It is something that you know, the holding company is there, but other than the commonality in terms of code of conduct, maybe the brand and the equity holding, each organization is in a different industry, and they all function very, very independently. I wanted to start with that caveat to say that anything that I'm going to be talking about, at least from a Tata Group perspective, I'll give you other perspectives if you guys are interested, and Dinesh will add quite a bit to that as well. There is no one sort of set approach to coaching, if you will. And I'm really intrigued by the name that has been given for this, the title that has been given for this session, which is, you know, how do you embed coaching culture in great organizations? And you heard Haripriya's definition of coaching culture. And I want to leave this slide on for a minute while I prattle, just to give you a sense of what we are trying to do. And trying is the operating word here. This started 2 to 3 years ago. There's a wonderful team that's pulling this together, and they're curating a coaching embedded culture within the Tata Group. And as all of us know, it's not going to happen overnight. Many of the Tata companies that are large and established have had coaching culture for several years. You know, you might have heard Pradeep from Tata Steel talk about it in one of the earlier sessions, you know, or others from, you know, that you're familiar with. Tata Steel, for instance, has deeply embedded coaching culture, and they started on it long back. In fact, Mr. Narendran, who's the MD of Tata Steel, is a big believer not just in coaching but also in mentoring. And for the last few years, they've really polished up and delivered very heavily on the great benefits of reverse mentoring. Now, all of you are, or most of you are professional coaches, and all of you clearly have interest in coaching. That's why we're here in this session. And so if you look at each individual Tata company, there will be a unique approach that suits their industry, that suits their demographic, that suits their executive needs, their development needs, and so on. But what CoachWorks is intended to do, and this is my first sort of point, if you will, is that we've curated this to try to do what we're calling democratization of coaching. We are enabling executives and leaders, primarily targeted towards them, through CoachWorks Executive, for example. Then you might have a group, a team, like a top team or even a middle management team that wants to become more effective. And for them, we've curated this thing called CoachWorks Group, where a team of us can go and get coached together. Or if our leader believes that this is something that we all need coaching in, and we all could do better with some sort of a coaching attempt. So whether it's a senior executive, or whether it's a group of people, or whether it's a youngster who wants to get into a relationship with a coach who can help guide and improve their performance, we have tried to curate some solutions for them. Now, why are we doing that? Is because as a group, what we do is we try and bring the best of coaching talent that's available in the market. So our job is to identify such people, help them understand the Tata culture, the Tata way of doing things, our code of conduct, our ethos, our brand, what we stand for, so on and so forth, what leadership development means, get them ready and empanel them. And then expose them to the marketplace, if you will. And then the individual executive or the individual mid-manager or whatever will then say that, hey, Haripriya seems to be an extraordinary individual, and I think that I would like to be coached by her for XYZ reasons. And then they'll have a conversation with Haripriya because she's already been empaneled. They don't need to go looking for a Haripriya. And of course, all of us know that chemistry is one of the most important things as far as coaching is concerned. So we give these individuals choices of 2 or 3 people. Our job, therefore, is to make sure that the supply side, the coaches side, is extraordinarily well curated and of top-notch quality and already understand the Tata context. And all the individual executive or manager needs to do is start aligning their performance plans and start talking about themselves, whether it's as a team or as an individual with that coach. And we think that that is how we are making coaching as a culture easier, right? I've got straight away into the tactical and operational stuff because we can sit and talk about coaching strategy till the cows come home, as to why is coaching necessary and why do we need to have a coaching culture in organization. All of us know all of that. But in an organization with 935,000 employees, with organizations large and small, some are 130 years old, and some have been acquired only in the last few months. Some are really, tiny startups. When you're dealing with a wide variety, then all one can do is help each one meet their stage of evolvement and help them find the right kind of coaching fit. So that's the first thing that I want to start with. And in this process, which has gotten quite nicely embedded, we have also started creating our own set of internal coaches. And that's the program that we call CoachWorks Pro, right? So there are certain people, and an MD of one of our biggest companies is currently undergoing a rigorous 8-month learning program. He shows up for every session. Just because he's the MD of such a large organization doesn't make him and he could be rubbing shoulders with somebody with 15 years of experience, and they attend these sessions together, they get coached. He wants to become a much better coach than what he already is. And by role modeling and leading by example, and I can give you several more examples, but I'll cut it short and say that that's the second approach to coaching culture. Our leaders are leading from the front in terms of becoming coaches themselves, and not just assuming just because I got 35 years of experience, I'm a coach. No, I am going to go through the rigorous process of becoming a professional coach, of becoming somebody whose wherewithal can then be funneled in the appropriate fashion using the right coaching methodologies. That's the second way we are embedding it in terms of our coaching culture. And the third, and I'll stop here, the third is this whole, I mentioned it in passing earlier about Tata Steel and reverse mentoring. The reason why we're doing that is we want coaching as a capability as well as coaching as a receptive mechanism to go right down to early career people. So just about half an hour ago, we had a class of graduating what we call Blue Minters. These are people with 4 to 10 years of managerial, of work experience. Many of them are managers, many of them are young leaders. And they go through a 12-month program with London Business School. And one of the things that they are then trained on is how do you become an effective reverse mentor? How do you then pick senior executives that you can mentor on specific things, such as maybe social media or skills that require next gen awareness and so on and so forth. All of us know what reverse mentoring is, but we preparing them. It's not just randomly saying that, okay, this person seems to be smart. Just like the senior executive has to go through a rigorous training, the junior executives also have to go through rigorous training before. But the whole idea is to throw open the access. Haripriya, if you could just move to the second slide. What we've done with all this is, I'm just offering this here, and Dinesh will pick it up from here, is that there are some trends that we're observing. Right, we've tried to capture it in 4 bullets, and you'll hear a lot more from Dinesh and UNILEVER, who have been at it for way longer than many organizations. So there's a lot to learn from UNILEVER that even I'm very keen on understanding, and I'll be very, very curious to see how effective Dinesh feels these things are happening in his end. But leveraging, all the 4 bullets are all, learnings that are key. But what I'd like to sort of double click on a little bit in the embedding of the culture piece is leveraging the power of the collective, which is working in a collaborative way. Because somehow, there's this thing that is attached about coaching that it is one-on-one. Yes, a lot of the relationship is one-on-one. A lot of the conversation is one-on-one. But there is this overall collective, right? We are finding that if one goes to a coach, if Dinesh is my coach and I go to him, he can also tap into other people to help me in certain areas. And that's something we're calling as a collective. So it's not just about team coaching and democratization and all that. But this is also about how can the collective bring to bear what is required. And that also has a very subliminal message, as you will pick up, that starts then percolating across the organization. So I'll pause here and we'll hear from Dinesh and then we'll circle back. So over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you so much, Anand. And I must say at the outset, a few opening comments. It's an incredible privilege for me to be here. It's always a privilege to share the podium with Haripriya and Anand. But interestingly, I was just reminded of a week back when Sanjeev Mehta, our Indian CEO, shared a podium on Rendezvous at Taj with Meet Chatwal, the CEO of Indian Hotels. Yeah? And I thought it's interesting that a week later, the Tatas and Levers come together on another forum, and it's really a privilege. It's also a super privilege to speak at this forum because a lot of you play very senior and very key roles in your organizations and have a very key role to play in people's development and the organization's growth. So I enter this more as a student than as somebody who's going to talk and share experiences, and also equally keen to hear what Anand has to say. I've also seen Dr. Pramod Sadal Joshi's comment in capital letters that high expectations. Pramod, I hope we don't disappoint you. And Ramesh, lovely to see you. I remember the days when we spent time when you were at Siemens. So delighted to be on the same panel with you as well. So just a few opening starting comments in terms of coaching at UNILEVER. We've tried our bits and pieces, and over the years we've kind of refined it in many ways. And I think there are some things that actually we can talk about later that give us the opportunity to play this at a much wider scale. So this is about how we embed the coaching culture in UNILEVER, and maybe a few thought starters to the discussion. Yeah? So if you can move to the next slide, Haripriya. I think one of the fundamental pivots of building a coaching culture is leaders building leaders. So the idea cannot be necessarily that people outside will come in and do it, but unless people in the business feel that it is really key to the success of the organization, it's really difficult to embed this culture. And I think we are really privileged and fortunate that in UNILEVER in the last 60, 65, 70 years, this has been actually a very important part of the culture of the company. And if one goes back to the speech that Prakash Tandon made many years back as the first Indian chairman of the Hindustan Lever business, Hindustan Lever in those days, he really talked about this whole thing on management development and how important coaching and leadership development was as a way of generating and building future leaders. So I think the top part in red is really leaders need to take ownership for building leaders, and that's really how we build a coaching culture. And if you look at the three blocks that we could characterize the culture at UNILEVER, the first part is about our purpose, which is really to make sustainable living commonplace. But I'll talk a bit more about the role of purpose in building coaching. The second is really our approach to well-being. That ultimately, coaching must look at the holistic well-being of the person you're looking at, and that's purposeful, physical, mental, emotional. So all of it coming together, because the impact you want to create is an inspired and an engaged leader. And that's really the objective of coaching from a professional organization perspective. And the third part is what we call our standards of leadership. So we have two parts to the standards of leadership. There's an inner game and there's an outer game. So the inner game is how you manage yourself, and it's about your agility, it's about your ability to master yourself, it's about your purpose, it's about what drives you to get up every day in the morning and give service to your consumers and your customers. So there's a whole part in the inner game. We will talk more about that. And the second part is the outer game, which is how are you a catalyst for talent? How do you understand what consumers need, and how do you create business impact? So it's really the interplay, if I were to say, the yin and yang of the inner game with the outer game that really comes together from a coaching perspective. Now, if you just move to the next slide, and the next 2-3 slides are very simple. I think part of embedding coaching is really to make sure that you go back to the roots of the person you're coaching, and really go back to where does the person come from? What is the culture? What's really the background that the person comes from? Because ultimately, you need to build strong roots to build a tall tree. So you need people to create a sense of pride in the sense of their background and their value system and where they've come from. And ultimately, coaching can really succeed and be embedded if people are able to relate it to where they've come from. And I think in UNILEVER, we are a very middle-class company. I'm proud of it. Which is a very middle-class work ethics, very similar to the Tata, about strong work ethic, good integrity, making sure you run a tight and sharp business and delivering as much value, because we're all privileged by virtue of our education, to be in the jobs that we have. So the first one is about appreciate, understand, and thrive in your roots. If you move to the second slide, please, Haripia. The second slide on this is really about choices. So ultimately, coaching is not about telling you what to do. It's about saying that you want to open up the world to the different possibilities that are there in front of the person. So it's about helping the person understand the kind of choices that he or she might have to make in the organization or in life, and really helping guide them towards reaching a conclusion. And therefore, coaching works best when the person has the ability to stand back objectively and say, okay, what are the choices or options in front of you, and trying to understand, how that really works for that person, and letting the person make the choice as they move along. Yeah? And if I move to the last slide, I want to show you, which is a quotation that's actually guided my life a lot, which is from Richard Barton 1. I gave my life to become the person I am right now. Was it worth it? And ultimately, coaching isn't about a job. It isn't about a sport only. It isn't about any one nuance. It is about the totality of what the person would like to do. You can't be happy in a job if you have a life experience that's contrary to what works for your personal choices. So I think there is a huge responsibility on all of us as leaders, as coaches, to really understand what is the person really trying to do in their life, and how does what they want to do figure as part of that journey. And if I go back to my own life, in coaching, one of my strongest coaches was actually my sensei, Faruddin Shaw, who taught me martial arts many years back. But I was an experience that changed my life. It's not about the sports. It's not about the moves or the strokes on karate. It's not about the forms. It's not about the belt. Ultimately, it's about the kind of person you become, and the kind of commitment you put into what you do, and the kind of effort you put in. So as a coach, it requires tremendous amount of commitment to your coachee. So the one thing that builds trust is the ability to be completely committed to the person you're coaching. And I think on that note, we're going to take off the slides, and maybe Anand and I and Haripriya will get into a bit of a conversation around what's behind this and it's been done in a bit.
Great. Dinesh, I just wanted to pick up one interesting, several interesting threads that you brought in, and one piece that I wanted to bring in. Many years ago, for those of you that are listening in, Dinesh and I were, we've been working for 30 years, but we were very young when we started. We were 4, and that's when we started working. In those days, coaching was considered to be an extracurricular activity, right? There were some managers that were good at coaching and that picked it up out of an interest. And quite honestly, it was sort of an afterthought in many cases, right? Over a period of time, all of us have started seeing this happening, that one is the whole professional coaches coming in. There is a certain role they play and a value they add, and it's absolutely critical and essential. Sachin Tendulkar needed a coach, right? So if he needed a coach, and Andre Agassi needed a coach, and Federer needs a coach, everyone needs a coach. So no one's. I don't think it's any large organization is questioning the need for coaches. But the question is this, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, is we've started embedding coaching as a managerial skill or a leadership skill, if you will, into every single manager, right? That is how you need to lead people. It's a critical component of how you lead. Not that, okay, I'll lead people and I'm this giant visionary and I'll do all this magic, and if I have time, I'll coach people. No, that's what your predominant role is, and that's what your predominant. Has that all of us at an intuitive level and maybe at an intellectual level also understand it? But Dinesh, has that really started happening? Not just in Unilever, but across the spectrum of industries and companies and people that you interact with. I have a point of view, but I want to hear yours in terms of, do you see that tilt happening? If so, what's the what's your take on whether the velocity is appropriate, or you'd like to see more of it, less of it? What's it?
So that's a fascinating question. And firstly, I must say, Anand, I totally agree with the sports analogy, because all top sports people have coaches. Yeah, or most top. Let me not make a generalization. Whether you're a top squash player, a top tennis player, a top soccer player, there is a coach. Yeah, and I think that it actually helps you become even better if you're at the very highest level of the sport. And therefore, people at the highest level of any field or enterprise actually feel the need to be as good, because they're playing at a level that's really Premier League. That's a top class level. Yeah? So I think it's very important that we understand in business, to be great leaders, to be great business people, actually would help us. You're right that this is a profession that's coming into being, and I think the velocity is actually increasing over the last many years. We are actually blessed to work in organizations that have recognized this very, very early on. So the role of coaches in both Tata and UNILEVER have been there over 5 or 6 or 7 decades, and people have really been seen it from a very visionary sense. I think this is picking up traction around the world for a couple of reasons. Yeah? One is, 35 years ago when you and I started working, and I just said we started working really young, so please don't confuse the age maths with the work experience maths. But more seriously, there were few companies and organizations that one would work for, and very few organizations that you could spend a lifetime working with. Yeah? And therefore, people hung on to the jobs they had. And actually, what was the premium was get a government job and stay there. That was, at least in India, the perspective a lot of people had. Today, there's a fundamental change that's happening. Yeah, actually, there are 2 fundamental changes that are happening. One is there's an element of choice. Everybody has a lot more options, whether it's in terms of whether you're studying biochemistry or physical sciences or music or whatever. You have choices from what you study to where you work to the kind of organizations you work in, and you could just go and start a company. So there's one fundamental pivotal change that's happened of choice. The second is really in terms of the reach of the media, and therefore the reach of whether it's social media or LinkedIn or sessions like ours. The amount of information that you have available to you is dramatically more. I don't even want to give a number, whether it's 100 times, a million times more. Therefore, your understanding of other experiences and what can happen is much, much more, and therefore it leads to the choices. And the third dimension is people travel a lot. The world is much more international. And therefore, you're not restricted to a choice in India or in Bombay or in Mumbai or anywhere else. So I think the three of these things have meant that people now take a great amount of the decision making themselves. Therefore, the role of a line manager is not to restrict flow of information, but is to help them sift through this information and guide them to help them take the right kind of decisions. And therefore, the role has changed. 30 years ago, the primary source of information about your job and your career was your boss. Today, most youngsters will come and tell us about the options they have, what they want to do, what they're suited for. They'll go and take an MBTI test or some other test, and they'll come and tell you this is what their really strengths and weaknesses are. So, as leaders, all of us have to realize that there's a tectonic shift in industry and operation. So, I think it has shifted, and as organizations and leaders understand their role is critical. And I would say that across the world, this is happening in, across the businesses that I support around the world, it's happening in different places, in different parts of the world. I think India is, by the way, very, very, we tend to think many times that maybe India is not as good as other countries. Actually, they're very, very far ahead in the race because we have a large number of people who understood this is a skill set we need. We have fora like these that actually talk about, coaching and building a skill set up. I think we also have a large amount of empathy in terms of relating to people on a relationship level, and that makes a big difference in building, as you said, the chemistry. So that's my 2 bits worth. Let me hand it back to you for your view, and I have a question after that.
Sure. No, my view is it resonates with what you've just outlined. In fact, my predecessor, Emmanuel David, who just retired from the Tata Group, and now he's doing various other things, including coaching. He's always been a phenomenal coach. One of his favorite sayings was he gave me a candle. Let me give the backstory. So when I took over from him, we had an overlap period, and he's one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. He's been through a lot personally, and but you'll never guess that. And he, with his family, and his children, he hands over this little candle, sort of with a candle stand and all that, on the last day that he and I worked together. And then he left. And then there was a little handwritten note, which I discovered much later as I took the candle out, because one looked at the candle and put it away. And that handwritten note had his favorite saying, which says that no amount of darkness in the world can snuff out a little bit of light. Right? So where and this is brilliant. And Emmy's life has been lived like that it's always, so there's this coaching, I think coaching culture, sometimes we feel, at least, in a large and clunky group like ours, I would feel that how are we going to accelerate adoption, and what are we going to do, and schemas that we'll come up with, this, that. But I think the percolation effect is most powerful, to your point, that if every manager says that I'm going to pick this up, right, and it's going to be an extension of the way I lead, I manage, I do whatever, I think that becomes then a much more long-lasting thing than any programs one can come up with, or we need those. I'm not suggesting we don't need the evangelization and all of that. We absolutely need those, but a little bit more of the percolation, that what will actually stay permanently in the organization is when everybody does it, and that little light will start, and then it'll assume a life form of its own. And I'm seeing that happening in very many organizations, including, I'm sure, yours. And so my perspective is entirely like, I loved your roots analogy, because I think the key role of the coach is that if you can help people, that's the irony, right? If you can help people be themselves more, then that's the job.
That's right.
I think that's the most effective way. It's not about transforming them at all, actually. The more you transform, the more it's back to the roots, and that's where you're at your most powerful and your most, sort of productive, or whatever it is, whatever the right terminology you want to use. But the authenticity, the power of authenticity comes with the root. Everything else is seasonal. It'll change. The leaves will fall. There'll be fruits, then it'll change. But the root, that will never change. And that's true authenticity, which I think if we can get that across to, leaders as coaches, I think it'll be a beautiful transformation that the whole organization will go through.
Right,
so lovely.
And this actually sparks off another, similar thought in my mind, and I'm going to come to my question after that. I think, coaching, as you rightly say, is both the logic and the skill set, but I think 80% of it is the magic. Yeah? And coaching is heart-led, it's not head-led. So you know all the tools, and you know all the techniques, and you know all the stuff you need to do. But the real coaching journey starts when you connect with the person and really connects when you can empathize and you feel for the person. Because then the person knows you're batting for them. And ultimately that wins 90% of the war. When you know you're batting for them, that's the ultimate play in. So I really think there's a magic around coaching which we can explore. But I have a question for you which is probably broader. I've always been fascinated with the Tata Group because there's so many different corporations, so many different cultures, so many different industries. Yeah. How do you manage to build a common culture of coaching across very different sets, 100, 125 companies, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah? How do you build this common fabric? Yeah, because each company ultimately has its own culture, its own CEO, and it's a group, it's a conglomeration, right? But there's some things you want to keep very, very consistent. Values, for example, everyone knows the Tata product, Tata hotel, Tata car, it stands for a certain, value system. So how do you keep this coaching value system consistent across the range of companies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think there's a silver bullet. It's a lot of grit, spit, and hard work that's been going on for many, many years. So I've been around a bit, as you know, Dinesh, in multiple countries and multiple companies, but never have I seen the fondness. No, I should back up. Not never. It's very rare to see the fondness that every single Tata leader or average manager or employee has for a founder who died hundreds of years ago. And this is not lip service. This is not where I sit in Pune at the Tata Management Training Center. Right next door, we have what is called the Tata Central Archives, which is curated by one of the most knowledgeable guys about the Tata. His name is Narla. And Harish Bhatt, whom you all must have heard of, who's written books about Tatas and Rusi Lala, all of these guys. So all of them have chronicled and got stories of how, right from the get-go, Jayan Tata, and whether it was not this Ratan Tata, but the Ratan Tata that was there earlier, and then JRD and everybody. Jayan Tata, 100 years ago, it's archived, he's written it, that he and a couple of other family members are sitting around the table and talking, and it's just a photograph, but the archive below that states that they will be very happy if this entire group is run by a non-Tata one day. 100 plus years ago, when that concept itself didn't exist. One started a company to not build an institution. It's for your family, it's for you, it's for your money, but nation building or building institution, I think just came naturally to them. So I'm just astounded the more and more I unravel and understand the group. It's been all of 1 year only, but I started here 34 years ago, and I've sort of come back as maybe the prodigal son. But what it tells me is that it started there, right? In terms of code of conduct, ethics, integrity, all the stuff that you mentioned, all the stuff that we are famous for. Now, if I were to take a leaf out of that for the coaching culture, which was your question, and I know it's a long-winded answer to get there, but I think that anything that the group decides to do, which is common across, follows the same ethos. And the group doesn't mandate much, other than the focus on community, other than this integrity, other than the code of conduct. The group, the executive chairman office, the chairman emeritus office, they don't mandate. It is all by gentle suggestion. But perhaps because of that, Dinesh, people immediately pick it up. Right? If maybe it would be very, very different if it were mandate driven and rule driven and KPI driven, and I dare say that this whole soft touch is what the strength is. As paradox, right? I mean, that's a. So coaching culture, coming back to that, that's why what we're trying to do is saying that coaching now has to be part of every leader's, manager's job. We are here to help facilitate, right? And not, again, force any particular methodology. There is no Tata methodology of coaching, right? The 100 or 200 plus coaches that we have empaneled, each comes from a different school. So there is no, you've got to be ACC, or you've got to be this, or you've got to be Marshall Goldsmith. You come with your own style, as long as you understand our culture, then, and understand, like you said, the fundamental nature of that human being that you're dealing with. right? That's what we believe. Like everything else in the Tatas, I suspect this will happen a little more slowly and a little more deliberately than it could in other conglomerates or other organizations. But I think once it goes in, it will stay in. And I think that's the power of this percolative effect, I think. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I have observed so far.
I think, by the way, that also, I should say, as Spider-Man's uncle says, with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
I'm not sure whether he actually said it, but that's the folklore. I think there are two thoughts that come to mind. One is that for all of us in this gathering, the responsibility when we coach is huge. That we coach the people who are working with us to have a much longer term vision, a much lasting, enduring, kind of sense, as opposed to short term, here and now, let's change this behavior, achieve this goal, and so on. Because the power of actually the long term is 10 times more than doing something fast in the short term. Yeah? And a lot of us must be, a lot of you may be coaching startup, people who work in a startup environment. Yeah? These are companies that can really build for the long term. Tata at some time was a startup. UNILEVER 100 years ago was a startup. And you're absolutely right, the founding fathers had a vision to say this is the kind of corporation that we want to build, small or big, but this is the value system and this is how it's going to run. So I think the responsibility as coaches to make sure we look at the long term, and don't look at the short term, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. So that let me take that. We've been at it for about 35 minutes now. I want to just poke the bear a little bit. I know there are a lot of folks listening here that are professional coaches and brilliant ones at that. But here are one or two areas that I'm personally trying to help or argue with our coaches. So firstly, I believe that coaches have to ultimately help with performance. Now, the performance might be defined in various ways, but ultimately it's about, if Sachin is getting a coach, then it's about his batting. If Federer is getting a coach, it's probably about his backhand or whatever it is. Ultimately, it's about performance. I'm not even going to the direction of winning and championships and all of it. Just simply staying with the sports analogy of skill, upgrade, and performance. Now, if our coaches, one of the things that they have to, and I include myself in this, whether I'm a leader as a coach or whether I'm a professional coach that is only coaching, I will need to become much stronger with the emerging generation, a lot of whom could be saying that I don't necessarily want to grow in the sense of traditional vertical growth or whatever. I will do just enough and maybe not much more, because that is going to become a refrain that we will hear more often than not. So the highly driven people, who want to improve, who will come to the party and who try and do whatever it takes, that nobody needs to motivate them. They're self-motivated, they just need a little bit of direction. But how do you take someone who's not necessarily motivated in the traditional sense of performance motivation, and how do you convert them? And that's what I want to go back to your roots analogy, because I think that if I were to break it up, one of my bosses used to say that self-reflection is like looking at the mirror. The mirror is very forgiving. You all know what, you can make out what size I am, right? So when I look at the mirror, I'm okay. Every day I look at the mirror, I'm not upset. But once in a while, when I look at my full-sized photograph and I see all the various bulges in all the various places, and I shouldn't have eaten so much, or I should really watch out. And that's the photograph. So the mirror is different from a photo. The photograph is less forgiving than the mirror. But the video is the worst, right? And I see coaches not as photographs or mirrors, but as that video. Are we demanding enough to actually tell people that this is not okay? It's not about me being Mr. or Miss Nice Person, but it's about your performance, and wake the hell up, or whatever the equivalent of that is, that discretionary effort. So I'm asking, really, I'm wondering, I've been struggling with this. How do you get that whole generation, which is apparently the quiet quitting generation, right? That just enough is enough. I'm not going to do anything more. and how do you get that past the just enough to do more, and it's your life. And the other one is dig deep in order to find your true purpose and your true motivation, and then go. I think that our coaches need to do a lot more work in these areas. I don't know what you feel, Dinesh.
So I'm responding as the bear, because you said you're going to poke the bear. So I'm assuming I'm the bear that is going to poke, and you've seen the bottom part of the video, and you can see how big this the bear is. Yeah, so let me be also a little provocative about this. I think the frame of reference is slightly different. Yeah? I actually think a lot of youngsters want to do a lot more, but it doesn't necessarily have to be from the job. You see, when we grew up, we defined ourselves around our job, and what we do. If you introduce yourself, you say, I'm working in XY company, this is the role I have. And as you started accumulating titles, you felt a certain sense of accomplishment, and you felt, okay, I've achieved a set of milestones. I think that's changed. Yeah. We do, by the way, in HUL and UNILEVER, we provide coaching to all the management trainees who join our business. And it really helps in the first 18 months. They have a coach right through the 18 months, and it makes a big difference, because it just comes from the world of academics into the real world of industry or corporations. It makes a big difference to them. I think what happens today, and I may be wrong again here, is people want to do different things. And the career is one dimension or one facet or one nuance out of that. I think from a performance perspective, I agree with you that ultimately coaching is about performance in some form or the other, whether it is about performing better as a business leader or better relationships so that you can be a better business leader, turning around the business, you can turn the business around, or succeeding in a different country. So you're going to work in a different country, and therefore how you culturally fit into the country. Ultimately, in an organizational context, it's about how does the organization perform better and how do you help be part of that story. But I think, the role of coaching in my mind is actually stepped up now, because, as I said earlier, the choices people have are dramatically new. The data they have is dramatically new. So the in-feeds of data and what companies are like, what jobs are like, what bosses are like, is so much more. And therefore, it's also more difficult to try and make meaning and sense and create a sense of what you want to do. Yeah? Which is why I think, and what you said actually is the yin and yang of it. Helping somebody understand the purpose behind what they want to do, and by the way, the purpose can change over time.
Correct.
Right, yeah. But at every stage of your life, and we've done some work around, what do people want at different stages of their life cycle, and you find that we call them tribes or whatever. It's very interesting how a 20 to 25-year-old, 25 to 35, or whatever, different functions, man, woman, whatever, there are very different trends around what people actually want in life. And you may find that, understanding your sense of purpose and what you want to do contributes to helping you clear some of the clutter. Say what really, what gets me going. So if I want to help people, for example, I want to set up a blind hospital. Do I need to leave my job to do it? Can I actually do it in my job itself? Can I contribute to something more than, what the job allows me? So I think it's a combination of helping frame the rules differently, but also helping people make a sense of purpose around where they want to go and clear out the clutter. And sometimes the conclusion to that could well be that actually the person is probably better suited to chase that, starting up their own company or working in a different company or whatever. And to me, that's also good performance counseling, because at the end of the day, you're helping people come to the right decision for themselves and for the organization. Yeah. But I think the role of coaching, to my mind, has actually stepped up, and our ability to appreciate the confusion that people sometimes have, so they can make up their mind, because they're forever told by old men and women like you and I. I'm not actually, I shouldn't include you, but you should do this, or this is how a career goes, or this is what a typical career path is like, and you've got to do this to succeed. So I think there is an extra step up from coaching that could actually help. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would just add one dimension for you to consider, and for everybody to consider. Absolutely, as far as the professional coach is concerned, but the leader as a coach. I think the leader is a coach or the manager is a coach, whatever the term you use. They're getting a little antsy because this is not the way I grew up, or this is not the way I performed, and therefore thou shalt. I think the professional coaches do a far better job than this leader as a coach, because they have that whole vested interest, because there's agendas here. Unlike for the outsider who has no agenda, this guy has an agenda. He has something that he needs to get out of this individual. And that's where it becomes asynchronous between between me being a coach and me being a demanding manager. And that's all the more reason why you can have coaching as a part of your responsibility and style, but you still need that external person to come in as a specialist, and maybe external persons. Maybe the time will come, and it started happening, I think, in many cases with senior executives for us, where we have 2 or 3 coaches for specific areas. Getting people ready to get into the board, that's a different kind of coaching that is required from the typical normal, executive coaching or life coaching or whatever. So it started, but I don't know if it's happening quickly enough in across the organization. So that's what we are grappling with in terms of how to institutionalize that.
You're absolutely right, and I think you need a combination of people you can work with. Just like in sports, you have a physiotherapist, you have a resilience coach, you might have a batting coach, and whatever. You need psychologists. You might need different people, and I think the options are available today. You're absolutely right. The line manager plays a certain role in this coaching experience, but depending on what stage of your career you are or what you want from the coaching, and I always insist that people work out a brief. What do you want from this coach? This relationship. What's the impact you want to create? How do you see yourself stepping up? Because if you don't visualize what you want, then it's very difficult to have somebody else come and say, "Give me a cookie cutter approach. Okay, just teach me, 5 things, and I'll go away as a happy, clappy person." So I think you're right. I think we need to look at it as a bouquet of people working with different things. They can also help you at different points of time in your career.
Right.
So
go ahead then.
No, I was also intrigued that when you work outside India, you work inside India. What do you see are differences in your mind about how coaching operates in an international or Western? Let me say not international, because there's an Asian mindset as well that you could refer to, but a Western perspective and an Indian perspective. What do you see are a couple of maybe 2 big differences or similarities?
So I worked for about 23, 24 years outside in various countries outside of India, but always kept in touch with India, did business in India. So it's not that I went away and came back and suddenly realized that everything is different. So, and for 12 of those years, I was working very closely with Marshall Goldsmith, because my firm at that time had a deal with him, and we used to offer coaching through him, his academy, and all of that. And Marshall, in his own inimitable style, he had this analogy at that point in time, where he said that the Western acceptance of a shrink or psychologist or psychiatrist was ahead of the Asian acceptance of. People would think that there's something wrong with me if I have to go, or I have to admit an issue. For physical health, you would go to a doctor, but even for physical health, his analogy is that Asians, and he was generalizing, but you can read into it what you will, but the Eastern folks from the East would be more recalcitrant, even going to a medical doctor, and then to a psychiatrist or psychologist. And he says coaching is even sort of even below that, right, from a acceptance perspective. So his thing was that we need to catch up, and we need to therefore evangelize what a coach can do. Now today it's India's way ahead, like you said, right? But this wasn't true 15, 20 years ago, where it was more, coaching was more, far and few between. Senior people, didn't openly admit that they needed coaching, or they would have surreptitiously going to some coach or the other and not declare it, and certainly not make it organization-wide knowledge or whatever. And they would say it's more a different type of relationship. But that clearly the acceptance and the acceleration has happened, at least in India. And like you're rightly pointing out, in the Far East, it's still a bit more to catch up, right? India's acceptance, especially in the larger organizations. But if you go to grassroots India, if you leave the organized sector out, do promoters of mid-sized organizations have coaches? Do they, maybe the second or third generation is more open to it, but they would feel the need for more strict strategy or specific interventions. I need some strategy help, or not that I need assistance, but I need perspectives, or I need, the organization needs perspectives rather than me needing help. And that's one change. It's certainly changing, but I don't know if it's changing in the across the entire length and breadth of the industrial force that India is. That is one. And the second piece is that somehow I think that we expect coaches to do magic. Or like you said, the logic and magic part of it. So HR, and I would squarely blame many CHROs, that they're willing to invest only a little bit. It's like you have to take an aspirin and wait. It's not going to happen instantly. These behaviors are deeply embedded over 25, 30 years. How is that person going to come and, suddenly change the behavior and, all of that? So this coaching as a flirtatious relationship, we'll try for 3 months. You do 4 interventions. I've actually heard this in SLAs with coaches. I don't know if you guys have experienced it, but we'll have 4 interventions. We'll meet 4 times in the year, and each session is 90 minutes, and that for that 90 minutes, this is your commercial. How is that ever going to, make a significant change? I think that investment, putting your money where your mouth is, I think is still lagging. Even though we have many more in the supply side, I think we're a little more sorted. But demand side, I think, is a little skewed. This would be my take, Dinesh. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but this is what I'm seeing. Maybe that many coaches here, they are living this on a day-to-day basis, so I'm sure they will also have some points of view around this. But back at you, Dinesh, on the same similar or related point is even in Unilever, you're not a monolithic organization. Unilever US is very different from Unilever UK is different from here. How are you guys managing that disparity? I'm sure you have some common constructs, right? But how are you managing for the country nuance or the maturity nuance or any of those in terms of just the coaching culture embedding?
So I think by the way, it's interesting how it's not terribly different from what you said about the Tatas. Yeah? The founding philosophy is very similar. I think the Lever brothers are one of the first people who started social, security in the UK 100 plus years back. We have good housing for employees and very similar. Right? So I think what binds everyone together is a value system which is the same. And this culture of actually saying you join in and you want to see people. Everyone has spent 20 years, 30 years, of course, you have youngsters who have spent 5-7 years, but then you look around and you say, everyone I'm meeting in the room has spent almost their entire lifetime. That creates a kind of fact that it's a journey. So I think, and that we have been helped in our journey and we need to help other people who are along the journey. So I think there's a value system, there's a longevity, and therefore what that gives to, for people's perspective on this. And there is also the community piece, which is that, what is good for the country has to be good for the company. And what's good for the company has to be good for me. So it's, country first and then the company and then. So I think these three, if I were to say actually bind the company together in quite a similar way. I think the social fabric varies. As you say, in countries like India, there is a lot of pressure on people to feel that they are perfect, that they can do everything, and there's a stress factor to showing vulnerability, that I don't know the answer, or I'm not good at this dimension. And it probably comes from a very competitive school and college atmosphere where you try and come first, your parents ask you, which rank were you in class, and so on and so forth. And that creates a sense of I've got to be best at everything, and I've got to be able to do everything, which leads to the space that, asking for help, if it's not around financial understanding or, stuff which is tangible and all that, means that maybe I'm not good enough. In the HUL company, of course, there has been a long history of building leadership and supporting people for coaching. So it's not an issue, but I think from a country perspective around the world, people sometimes feel more insecure because of the pressure to be complete, the complete man or the complete woman or whatever. And I think as coaches, our objective to say should be to say, okay, you can't be perfect at everything. The question is, can you be as good as you rightly said? Ultimately, the whole thing is just to be yourself and be as good as you can be yourself. And I again go back to that quotation which I showed in my last slide, which is, I gave my life to be the person I am today. Was it worth it? So what do you make out of your life? It's your journey, and what you accomplish is really what you want to look back 20 years later, 30 years later, and say, this is what I created. And I think once we free people from that, then they feel that this is something beyond Otherwise it's seen as performance that, I'm poor at my job and therefore I'm going to get coaching.
Yeah.
Does that
absolutely. No, absolutely. And where we're trying to see this philosophy not overlap, but sort of have an osmosis effect. And that I mentioned right up top, if you remember, Dinesh, is the team coaching piece. Because if we continue with our sports analogies, teams also have coaches. It's not just individuals, right? The individual might have a specialist coach for a particular purpose or, need assistance in one area or the other. But team coaches have the larger objective in mind, how all of this it's not just about team building. Yes, that's a very important part of are we gelling together and, coming together. So team coaching requires different skills. And I think a lot of the supply side dynamics that I'm seeing, people are very good at one-on-one coaching. But where we need to do better is at the team coaching. Now, there are some people, right? Sales coaches are available. You can take a whole sales team, territory, Northeast, and turn it around. And there are very good guys, typically ex-sales leaders that become over a period of time excellent at that. But other than one or two R&D coaches are there. Now digital coaches is the next best thing that's happening, which is very good because several CXOs need digital transformation skills and they don't have it. And you can get them digital coaches. But other than these, sort of disparate examples, this team coaching is an area that we believe will have a multiplier effect without threatening to come into the individual's, let's say, personal space, and you get to open them up and meet larger objective at a bit more efficient, because not all the issues are going to be the heart or that sort of issues. It could be actual skills, actual ways of doing things. But having said all of this, it's not easy. It's not easy to map a team, and it doesn't happen with a 1 or 2 day workshop. It's consistently helping people and coaching them and being in the trenches with them. And that's where I think, if this community of coaches that is listening to us or others that they can talk to, if they can pick up those sort of capabilities somehow and enable themselves or others in this, I think it should be very helpful for an organization like ours that wants more teams to get coached. I don't know how you're tackling it in Unilever.
So it's no, you're right. It's not. It doesn't come easy. A lot of coaches are very good at one-to-one coaching. We are actually, we've worked with a couple of team coaches, at different teams. And I think there's one, for example, we had one leadership team that had a lot of changes. And we wanted the new team, which is, had a bunch of almost half of them were new people. We wanted them to come together and create a culture that is unique and build a set of understanding and chemistry that could actually multiply the impact the team could have. And so you had somebody who come in and actually work along the team, attend all the meetings and look at the dynamics, point out feedback, and maybe take an individual aside and talk to them about it, talk to the leader, show them a mirror. Truth to power is an important characteristic for being especially a team coach, because there's a hierarchy and dynamics that operates in the team. So we've had that kind of a situation, a very senior set of leaders working on that. We also have another situation when, we've just, for example, moved our teams from being a division to a business coach. So now we have end-to-end accountability, and we want people to take, step up the overall team performance with a multiplier effect. And we have a very strong clean future agenda, which is about saying that you can impact community positively, be affordable, and still deliver great value to the consumer. So you want somebody to work with a team to say, how do you step up as a team? So as individuals, the question I ask is always, and actually my ex-boss used to ask me this question, a gentleman called Nick Dalton, are you a team of leaders or are you a leadership team? And intuitively, obviously that makes sense by itself. You don't even need to explain it. But you have great people who come up as leaders who have learned to be super successful in their careers by delivering an individual agenda or an impact across a team. But when you come together, some of the greatest soccer teams may not have an all-star team. And I go back to Moneyball as an interesting movie I've seen. We try and understand, what characteristics get a top-class team together. I think the future of our coaching efforts, as you very, very rightly said, and I hate being so agreeable in public because sometimes it seems as if we've planned this before, but we haven't. But the fact is, the next challenge for us is how do we get teams to step up performance? Yes, there's an element of individual coaching in it, but what do people do together? That the sum of the parts is much greater than the individual parts. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's really the challenge for us.
Great. We're on Haripriya. We're at 2 minutes past the hour. Do you what's your scene? Should we ask folks to ask us questions, or how do you want to run this? Or Dinesh and I can keep talking for the next 5 hours. But
It was brilliant, and everybody's enjoying this conversation. And I see a lot of questions and comments and statements, and I'm just typing all my statements in the chat box myself. So we do have a couple of questions. Can we take some of them?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
Dinesh, you okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you feed them to us, IPS, so you tell us and point it to either or both of us?
Yes. Mandyam Niranjan is asking, what is the reason coaching is only great for organization? Can you please define great organization?
Well, I don't think, I don't know, maybe Dinesh has a different definition. I think the topic was picked by you guys saying that how do you embed a culture in great organizations, change it and make it embedding coaching culture in mediocre organizations or any kind of in organizations. I think great as an adjective can be removed. We weren't talking about, I don't think either of us showed hubris about either of our organizations,
right.
Even though they've been around for a long time and all that. I think the point is it's less about the great and more about how do you embed a culture in an organization. That too, organizations as large and clunky and as complex as the ones that we represent. That's about it.
Right. Thank you.
Having said that, ultimately a lot of the principles that we talk about, to my mind, are actually equally applicable in an organization, as critical, as important, as small as a family. So, we that's also a great organization that we're all part of, and I think many of these things actually work really well as well. So,
but if I want to be cheeky, Dinesh, maybe I'm just thinking as you were speaking. Let's say Federer is one of the greatest players that ever lived. Tiger Woods is, his other proclivities aside, probably the best golfer ever. Right? Now, how do you coach such a great player? Or such a great that's extraordinarily successful, that is brilliant in many different ways? They still need coaching. That's the whole point. There is no organization or team or individual that is so exceptional that they can get by without a coach. And so that, I think in a way there is a hidden tongue-in-cheek point here as well, whoever created this topic. But I think we should take that kind of a topic with a pinch of salt anyway.
Yeah, as you embed coaching, it becomes great, and as it gets inside, it gets evolved, and that's how organizations become great. Thank you for that. Right, thank you for that. Sanjeev Bhatia asked a question. Leaders are great at conveying the message of coaching, but how can they be convinced to act on it as well?
Dinesh.
So, this is a bit of oxymoron. I believe a leader is somebody who walks the talk. If you don't walk the talk, you aren't really a leader. You're a senior person in the organization, you're holding a leadership position. There's a difference between holding a leadership position and being a leader. So to my mind, a leader is somebody who's consistent with what they say. And we all work hard to become good leaders. Huh? It's, just by virtue of being in a position doesn't make us so. So I think, real leadership happens when people have faith in, what people want to say. And being consistent and getting feedback. I mean, great leaders or good leaders always listen. They always want to hear what people have to say, what's feedback, and you find very few good leaders who don't want to get feedback, because ultimately that's how you see the mirror for yourself. And it's a journey. I mean, I'm not trying to, put a label on anyone as good or bad leader, but being consistent with what you say is one of the fundamental prerequisites of leadership, so people actually believe you and have trust you. So it's a journey for all of us. I know it's a polarized view. Anand, I don't know what your view is, but go for it.
No. I don't think it's a polarized view at all. I think it's a comprehensive view, and the greatness of the leader is in the openness to listening, like you said, right? And I don't think we struggle. I've worked with several promoter-led organizations in China, here, Southeast Asia. They are so hungry to learn and evolve. One would think that they would be stoic and, full of ego and my way. They're all that, yes. But in addition to that, if you can crack it and if you can say that here's what you need to do, they didn't get to where they are by not listening. So I would think that that's pretty much part of the DNA of a great leader.
Pretty well. Anand, this is for you. Avinash Chimote has asked, seeking clarity from Anand on power of collective. Is it that one employee benefits from more than one coach, or many benefit from one coach? That's group coaching.
Both. It's both. So we organize something called the coaching collective, for example, right? Where at any given time, you are picking up coaching skills and also becoming more coachable yourself, right? And that is a collective. It's not necessarily a small group or a one-on-one exercise. You can scale it and all of that. It's an experiment for us that's paying off very well. It was started, I think, 3-4 years ago. The group realized that if we need to accelerate adoption, if we need to accelerate the absorption of coaching as a culture, and we have a vast workforce distributed across industries, then one of the ways was to get to it at the collective, rather than the one-on-one will certainly happen, but the collective will raise consciousness, right? Will raise awareness and will raise a certain degree of introspection. And then you backfill. So that's not sufficient. You don't stop there. You still have to follow that through. But in terms of getting the awareness going, getting the velocity, so to speak, velocity is speed with direction, and that's why I use velocity rather than speed. It's that direction as a collective. And the other thing is that why do support groups work in general? Because even if I don't articulate an issue and I hear somebody else articulating an issue, it gives me the confidence that it's not just me, right? So that's the coachability part of it, that I just reaching out and that I need this or whatever. It doesn't always start off brilliantly. You need to work at it. Again, coaching as a skill. How do you practice it? How do you work on it? Again, as the collective. So longish answer, but it's both, and I'd like you to look at it from both perspectives.
That was quite clear. Thank you for that, Anand. An interesting point here, question again. Abhijit Bhattacharya is asking, manager as a coach and managerial coaching are different concepts and require different frameworks. These are ethical dilemmas with both, though considering that these are internal. Now, what steps are being taken in your organizations to clarify these dilemmas and safeguard the sanctity of the space? It's manager as a coach and managerial coaching are two different concepts. So how do we clarify these dilemmas and safeguard the sanctity?
I don't know, Dinesh, but I don't see this as a dilemma at all, honestly. I think it's quite clear, manager as a coach is that if I'm going to manage or lead people, and coaching is a skill that I need in order to lead them better for both achievement of certain objectives that are common, or for enabling that individual to flower out and become, fulfill their potential. Either which ways, I need that capability, right? I need that competence. So that's the manager or leader as a coach piece. And managerial coaching is I suppose what this individual means is that how do you receive or give coaching as an activity or as a subset of whatever it is you do. So I honestly don't see any dilemma here at all. But both are important. It just needs, what do you dial up and dial down, depending on what the situation demands. That's in a way, if you take family as a unit, as a performing unit, if both the dad and the mom wear the coaching hat all the time and have identical approaches, then it may not be as effective as two different approaches. One who would be far more supportive. I'm just making it up, right? Typical mom behaviors, as right? Who would be more supportive, will pick up the pieces, will encourage, and dad, which is sort of typically more demanding. And that's what this latest concept of this ambidextrous leadership is talking about. How can you be demanding and caring at the same time? It's not about long term and short term. It's about how can you be demanding and caring. That's what is required, especially with the emerging generation. So I don't know, Dinesh, whether you see a dilemma, but I certainly don't.
So I think there are a couple of nuances in this question. That, I'm not sure dilemma is the right word to use. I think actually reframing, some of what you said, in my own words, and which are in similar vein. I think the contexts of the two are subtly different. So, manager as a coach is coaching for a certain performance outcome, and coaching is part of the role that he or she is expected to play to make that outcome happen, which is in the context of your job and the objectives or target of your job. And there's probably a borderline around, anything that's outside of it, beyond which he or she will not necessarily give the same energy, and focus. Yeah. So there is a very particular context around which that's happening. It's, say, for example, a tutor is coaching you for math in school. They're not necessarily as interested in life lessons as much as getting you to be a really great math student. So the context is what is, I think, subtly different between the two, though they are leaders who actually transgress positively to also be life coaches. Yeah, because over a period of time you build a good relationship. And I know some of my leaders, Sanjeev, who's been my boss in India, Peter, who's my boss in home care, they're life coaches beyond just the job. And I keep going back on anything that would be important to me personally also. So I think the context frames the construct under which this coaching is happening. So that's probably a subtle nuance. I think the subtle commonality between the two is two. One is that as part of coaching, you might be privy to information that is particular or specific or, in some sense private also to the individual, and the need from a core of ethics perspective to rise above bringing that into a performance play, is really an important responsibility of a leader to make sure that's kept private if it's private, and to be able to step back and be objective and separate the context of what you did yesterday on the job to say I'm part of a larger journey, and therefore if there's a presentation that it didn't do well, it doesn't matter. There's a longer journey we're on this together on, and I think that's the responsibility that you need to switch in, and that kind of binds and that could happen in managerial coaching, that you're coaching somebody and that person responds in a way that to you sounds cheeky or arrogant or insolent. And you've got to step back and divorce the behavior out and actually say, okay, what are we trying to do here? Yeah? So I think there's a difference in the context and the reference, and there's a commonality about the responsibility from an ethics perspective, which I would see. I also think the manager has probably access to many far fewer alternative sources of people or reference points or models or constructs which a professional coach might have access to, and therefore what they can bring to the relationship is a very deep understanding of your context and what performance outcomes needed. And what a managerial coach can bring to the context is what's happening in the outside world, how other people will do it, and how other organizations or professionals will handle it. I don't know if I've given a long-winding answer, but it's an interestingly nuanced question.
I think that sums it all. It's in fact, a manager has access to various other resources as well. That I think that's great. Thank you for that. Another interesting piece from Pradeep. Mindful of time, we have another 15 minutes, but this seems to be a little interesting. So both the eminent speakers, your organizations, I mean Bidappa's and Anand's organization, UNILEVER and Tata, are large at scale. Does UNILEVER or Tata follow a framework or a playbook to establish, grow, and nurture coaching cultures in their respective organizations at scale? They're pretty curious to know what would that look like if there is one. Could you give us a bird's eye view?
You want to go first?
No, go ahead, Dinesh. I'll come back.
Okay. So, yes and no. I think we talked about it a bit earlier that having too much of a framework ultimately sometimes takes away from the individuality of the experience that you want that coaching to have. I think there's some things that are clear, which is what is it that you want people to achieve out of coaching. You create an overall framework that people operate in, which is the context of your company. Ultimately, our standards of leadership or our value system is the context within which our coaching relationships in the company are, and other companies that have a different set of competencies, behaviors, values, whatever. And so that frames the coaching relationship. We provide a variety of options, and of course, we have coaches for management trainees, you have coaches for senior leaders, you have coaches for new leaders, and when they get to a certain level, you have coaches for people who are going into, as I said, different countries. You You have coaches for people who are joined from a at a senior level from a different company. You have coaches for people who struggle with interpersonal issues in the workplace. So there are frameworks in the sense of what programs or what technologies are available to people, very similar to what Anand showed as well. But this is like it's like a buffet. Yeah? There are some things that you will have, probably a rice and a curry and bread for your meal and a dessert with your meal. But you also have the option and opportunity to choose from a range of options. And we know they're guided by leaders or coaches who have a common sense of purpose and have a common sense of ethics and a common sense of values, and which align with the larger organization. So there is that framework, because ultimately, if you have a coach whose value system is different from what our organization's value system, it's unlikely to be sustainable. And you want people to look long term. So you want coaches who work long term, because you want people to inculcate that mindset as well. So the framework is broad, and there's freedom within that framework. But I don't think it will be appropriate, accurate to say that there is no framework at all. And
completely the same, right? So I think you also recalled that that's how we both started our respective thing. That there is no one playbook or one strategy document for coaching. But it's based on a set of principles and philosophy rather than a playbook. But there is like you said, the value system match is the most critical. So that's the only thing that we're really, really looking out for, and nothing else. Methodology, everything else is left to the individual company or the coach or the manager or the leader.
If I were to add a postscript, I'm actually looking for a coach right now, and I met various people because I just a few months back moved to a slightly different role. And I believe that it would help me to have a coach to do this new job and to reinvent myself, as I do the new job. And I think what I also look for in coaches is the kind of experiences or backgrounds a person might have, and the kind of context that person has seen, just because that's the kind of richness I particularly want to bring into the relationship I have. So I think it's also important for the person who's going to be coached to think through what do they want out of the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? What's their framework of this piece?
Totally with that. Thank you. I hope Pradeep Natarajan, I hope that answers your question. On the similar lines, an interesting question here. What are some objective standards to measure the impact of transitioning to a coaching culture? From the HRs, business leaders at the business level, yes?
Sorry, could you say that again? I missed the half.
What are some objective or standards to measure the impact of transitioning to a coaching culture? So basically what they're looking at is some metrics, or what are the standards that we can measure and say that, yes, we are getting into the coaching culture.
Okay. So if I were to tell you that 45% of all Americans visit a psychiatrist at least once a year, I just made that up. I mean, I don't know how many percent. What would that tell us? That 45% need help, or America is a society where psychiatry is well accepted, or is it a culture where psychiatry is highly required? I think the penetration number-based metrics we don't follow. However, what we're certainly tracking is that we have managerial leadership competencies and all of that get measured all the time. Different companies in the group measure it differently. Some call them attributes, some call them skills, some call them competencies, whatever, right? So what we are seeing is an increased uptake of coaching as a competence, skill, attribute, whatever, part of the role that a manager has to play, getting more embedded there, right? So that's to us a lead indicator. Again, it's not a lag indicator, it's still a lead indicator. They could still go for it and then do a miserable job, right? They could still become very bad at it and all of that. And also simply the number of coaching conversations that are happening, coaches that are getting hired by the group, empaneled, absorbed within the company, there seems to be an increase, right? Again, it doesn't talk about the effectiveness. It just says prevalence has increased. That's all. So right now, I think we're only in the lead measure zone. I don't think we're ready for the lag measure zone yet. I don't know if Dinesh, you guys have arrived at the lag measure pieces yet.
No, and I think, for me, what's from a culture perspective, what are metrics of any dimension in culture? Probably how wide, how deep. These are the kind of things that we forget coaching anything. Yeah? So, if you want to say that have all your line managers, and there are different levels of this. There's an awareness level, there's an acceptance level, and there's a purchase level, just like in any brand, and there's a trust, and then there's a dependence, and whatever. So, for example, if you were to say that everybody has attended a coaching workshop in the company, that tells you awareness. Yeah, because you must be careful that just because you've attended a coaching workshop doesn't mean you're a coach. Yeah, but it tells you that okay, people are aware of what it is. So, important thing is what are you trying to measure? And the culture is built over a period of time. Yeah, so have people, for example, has everyone played the role of a coach once in, say, a management training relationship or whatever relationship? Has everyone been a line manager? And is coaching part of an attribute of a line manager? So I think the important thing is to understand the stage of which your organization is transitioning through, and say, what would you like to see? Would you like to see everybody know what it is? Would you like to see everybody try it out once? Would you like to see everyone professionally qualified? Would you like to measure the impact and see, okay, have all these relationships worked? And then you devise a set of measures that helps you understand. If I were to say coaching culture, it's all of these probably, but at different stages in different pieces. So if that helps, as you're transitioning, and your same organization would be at different levels. So it's not that one organization will be across. You have different parts of it. Senior, middle, junior, verticals different, locations different. Sometimes you have a leader who believes in it very strongly, and that part of the organization, suddenly it starts getting fostered a lot more strongly. And you've done nothing different. But because that person, as you recently asked, walks the talk and does it a lot more, people are much more alive to it. And his team or her team starts picking it up a lot more. I think the important thing is to see what are the triggers that actually help this, and I don't mean to say negatively, virus spread faster. And can you help implant those factors, to make it more sustainable?
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Yes, it depends on the level of what we are looking at as part of the transition. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. All right. I think we still have more questions.
I thought we put everyone to sleep.
No. I think questions are keep pouring in. I mean, the questions are pouring in, and I think I have a lot more. Too many things. And I don't know if I can just share it. It's coming in the live chat here. One of the somebody said yesterday that 72% of CXOs in the US have mental stress issues. It's just a statement that they have mentioned based on somebody had said yesterday. This is alarming and may not be different in India. Any thoughts on that? Because you worked in different organizations.
So if I should go first, Anand, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know the number. Yeah, and I don't know the source of the number. It's probably right, it's probably wrong. Difficult to say. But 1 in 4 people in India suffer from mental health issues. Actually, post-COVID in the last 2 years, there's been data. Again, don't ask me the source. I don't remember it offhand, but that 1 in 3 to 1 in 2 people have actually developed mental health issues in the last 2 years, given the fact of COVID and all of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a fair proportion of CXOs who feel this because the pressure of delivering in a difficult context, especially in the last couple of years, where your own employees, your community, your families have had to deal with an incredible amount of stress. Yeah? I think some of it is a sign of the times, some of it is a sign of performing organizations and struggling with difficult times. But as you go to leadership positions of the organizations, it does become a little more stressful to manage, and build up resilience of yourself in your organization. So whatever the number is, the reality, and I think the important thing is to acknowledge that there is the stress of organization in difficult times like this, because I also believe large corporations have a much larger role to play in society as opposed to just making profits and money, and therefore if you're sitting at the top table of a large organization, you should be conscious of the impact you have in the community. So it is, and I think if nothing else, it will help us dialogue and talk about this a lot more, and people be aware that this is a silent epidemic. And it's really important that we acknowledge it, and we have a very important role as a community, to help provide the shock absorbers with these times and these situations. Anand?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dinesh. I think you've covered it all. I just wanted to add that I think whether it's in the US or India, 72% seems low. I cannot imagine a CXO today in any job who doesn't have some sort of a stress issue or the other. Right now, whether that's right, wrong, or whatever, I think it's an issue. Right? Now, there is data in India that's saying that most, if not all of them, are running sleep deficit. Right? So that in and of itself is a bigger cause for alarm than stress. Sleep deficit is a much bigger health issue, much bigger psychological issue, much bigger killer, literal killer than and most CXOs, if you interview them, right, they will admit that there is some something breaking in the fabric that is helping them or not helping them sleep or whatever. So there are a lot of things that are moving parts in such studies and all of that. So I was startled to learn that the highest suicide rates in India are, I think all of us know, are Maharashtrian farmers as things stand now, right, in terms of incidents. I don't know whether we all know what the second is. The second is single women in Tamil Nadu. Young girls. Right? Now, that's just a random piece of statistic I'm throwing out, which is important, it's disturbing. But what do you make of it? Where do you start tackling that? Right? So the CXO stress is very true. I think it's far more prevalent in India than we would dare to acknowledge. What do you do about it? And that's why I think, we need to strengthen this whole approach to wellness, and Unilever and all and many Tata companies are doing a remarkable job. But there's that much only an organization can do, right? The rest is up to an entire cultural revolution that has to take place. And immediately we shouldn't come down to work-life balance and things like that. It's maybe it's not about work-life balance. Maybe the causality is something else. There's certainly a correlation between work-life balance and this. So I think it's a very legit concern. Whoever has asked that question or floated that point, it's a very legit concern. Not easy to tackle, but every single institution that at least I know is trying to do something about it at an institutional level. But do we have the wherewithal? Do we know the root cause? Do we know how to tackle? Or are we just looking at symptoms? That is a very good question. And I think a topic for a different forum on another day.
In fact, I was going to say this is a segue for a next 1.5 hour session exactly on this. So on this, let's hand it to Haripriya.
Let me host you for the next one as well, if that comes across. Yes, thank you so much. And circling it back, yes, coaching in the organizations, coaching culture in organizations is certainly a holistic approach where wellness, performance, behaviors, and etc. Brilliant. I think I'm humbled and I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. And thank you so much. I have a lot to talk about, but yes, wonderful listening to you both and all the attendees. Thank you so much for joining in and asking those brilliant questions. Very practical insights, amazing examples, and great insights from you both. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.